Most women believe that time is merciful, that it smooths the sharp edges of the past into something you can finally hold without bleeding. But some moments don't dull. Some moments calcify. Some moments sit in a man's chest for 5 years like a promise he intends to keep. 5 years ago, I walked into courtroom 4B in a pink dress because my lawyer said it made me look honest. I told the truth. Every word of it. And when the jury came back with their verdict, I watched Patrick Vane, the most dangerous man I had ever stood 6 feet from, get led away in handcuffs. He didn't look at the jury. He didn't look at his lawyers. He looked at me. And I thought, that's over now. I survived. I can disappear. I didn't understand yet that being seen by a man like Patrick Vane isn't a moment. It's a beginning. Welcome to Roses and Revolvers, where every story leaves a scar. If stories like this keep you on the edge of your seat, hit subscribe and comment where you are watching from, because the next one might be even darker. The fluorescent lights in courtroom 4B hummed like something alive. I remember that detail more than anything, the sound they made, indifferent and constant, while the rest of the room held its breath. I had rehearsed the walk to the stand. Left hand on the Bible. Right hand raised. Eyes forward. My lawyer had spent 3 sessions coaching me not to look at the defense table, not to look at him. I looked anyway. Patrick Vane sat with his hands folded on the table, one of them tattooed, dark ink curling past his wrist like a second skin, wearing a white suit that had no business being that clean in a room this heavy. He wasn't leaning forward. He wasn't tense. He looked like a man waiting for a meal to arrive. Not afraid. Not even angry. Hungry. I said every word I had come there to say. My voice shook twice. I let it. My lawyer had told me that was fine. Jurors trust trembling women. They do not trust composed ones. So I trembled, I spoke clearly, and when it was over, I stepped down from that stand and I did not look at him again. The verdict came back in 4 hours. Guilty. The bailiffs moved to his sides. He rose without being asked, unhurried, like a man who decided on his own terms to stand. And as they guided him toward the side door, as the courtroom exhaled around me, he turned his head. He turned, and he found me. In a room of 100 people, through the noise and the movement, he found me the way water finds a crack, like it had always known exactly where to go. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The look said it all. I will remember this face. I will come for the woman wearing it. And 5 years is not very long at all. I shook my head, almost imperceptibly. A refusal. A plea. Something wordless passed between us across that courtroom floor, and then the door swung shut behind him. I rebuilt my life after that. New name. New city. New job in a quiet archive where no one asked questions and the loudest sound was the hum of a dehumidifier. I told myself I was safe. I told myself the law was a wall and I was on the right side of it. I told myself that look had meant nothing. And then the television in my kitchen lit up with breaking news, and I heard his name, and I understood. He hadn't forgotten. He had never once, not for a single day, forgotten my face. He had simply been waiting for the door to open. The archive smelled like old paper and silence, exactly the way I designed my life to smell. Unremarkable. Forgettable. I kept the curtains 3 inches open, never 4. I knew every creak in the hallway floorboards by name. I had 2 go bags, one under the bed, one behind the water heater. My therapist called it hypervigilance. I called it Tuesday. 5 years of Tuesdays. 5 years of a name that wasn't mine, a city I'd never loved, a life assembled from the leftover pieces of someone else's safety plan. The marshals checked in quarterly. I made them coffee. We pretended it was normal. I was washing a single mug when the television said his name. Conviction overturned on procedural grounds. Patrick Vane walked free this morning after. The mug hit the sink. I didn't move. My body understood before my mind caught up, that cold, cellular understanding that every animal knows when the thing it has been dreading finally stops being hypothetical. I was in the bedroom in 12 seconds. Go bag from under the bed. Passport fake, good fake. Cash. Phone I'd never once connected to anything real. I was moving on muscle memory, hands steady, heartbeat catastrophically loud, telling myself, you trained for this, you trained for exactly this. I zipped the bag. I stood up. I turned around. He was standing in my living room. White shirt. No jacket this time. That same impossible stillness, like the air around him had learned to behave. He looked exactly the way he had in courtroom 4B, except for his eyes. In the courtroom, they had been patient. They weren't patient anymore. You packed light, he said. His voice was low and even, the voice of a man who had rehearsed this moment 10,000 times in a federal cell and was in absolutely no hurry now that it had arrived. That's smart. You always were. My fingers tightened on the bag strap. The door was behind him. The window was painted shut, I knew, because I had checked it the week I moved in and every week since. How long have you been in here? My voice came out steadier than I deserved. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something older and more dangerous than a smile. Long enough to know you sleep with the light on. He took one step toward me, just one, and the entire room shrank. Put the bag down, Annabelle. He tilted his head slightly, the way a man does when he already knows the answer to the question he's about to ask. Or we can do this the hard way. But you should know I've already spoken to your marshal. Both of them. The past tense stopped my blood cold. Both of them. Not, I've contacted them. Not, they know I'm here. Both of them. What exactly had he done to both of them? I didn't drop the bag. I want to be clear about that. I held on to it until my knuckles went white, because letting go felt like the last decision I would ever make for myself. Patrick didn't move toward me again. He didn't need to. He reached into his breast pocket and set something on my kitchen counter with a quiet, deliberate click, the way a man lays down a winning hand before the other player has even shown their cards. A folder. Thin. Cream-colored. Open it, he said. I didn't want to. I crossed the room anyway, because not knowing felt more dangerous than knowing, and I slid out the first page. Wire transfers. 18 of them, spanning 4.5 years. The account numbers were redacted, but the recipient codes weren't. I recognized the Marshal Service classification prefix immediately. I had memorized every document they'd ever given me, the way you memorize the face of your enemy. His money. Paying my guards. For 4.5 years. The program flagged your file as inactive 14 months after the trial, Patrick said behind me. His voice hadn't changed register once. Budget cuts. Your detail was quietly reassigned. Someone needed to fill the gap. The room tilted. I gripped the counter. 5 years of believing I was protected by the law, and the law had quietly folded its hand while the man I'd put in prison picked up the tab. I had been living inside his charity without knowing it, breathing air he had chosen not to poison. He hadn't kept me safe because he forgave me. He had kept me safe because I was his. There's a second page, he said. I turned it over. A single document, already signed at the bottom in his hand, sharp, decisive strokes, like everything else about him. At the top, in clean legal font, 2 words that rearranged every molecule of air in the room. Protective custody. It's not a cage, Patrick said, stepping close enough now that I could feel the warmth of him at my back. It's a debt. 5 years, Annabelle. You took 5 years from me. I'm collecting them. A pause, surgical, intentional. Sign it, or walk out that door and see how long you last before the syndicate finds you without me between you and them. My hand was shaking when I reached for the pen. His hand closed over mine, not violently, not tenderly. Simply. Completely. The tattooed fingers curling around my wrist like a door clicking shut. Good girl, he murmured. It wasn't until we were in the back of his car, the city dissolving behind tinted glass, that I thought to ask the question I should have asked first, the question that had been sitting in the folder like a splinter I hadn't found yet. If Patrick had been paying my guards for 4.5 years, who had been paying them for the 6 months before that? If you made it this far, you're not just watching, you're part of this story now. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. He dressed me in midnight blue and diamonds, which I understood immediately was not generosity, it was architecture. You don't put a crown on something you're ashamed of. You put a crown on something you're daring someone to touch. The gala filled 3 floors of his estate. Crystal, candlelight, men in suits that cost more than my old apartment. Champagne that no one was really drinking because everyone in that room was watching. Measuring. The women with their carved smiles and the men with their careful stillness, and every single eye in that ballroom finding me, the woman who had put their king in a cage, and not looking away. Patrick's hand rested at the small of my back. Light. Proprietary. A leash disguised as a gesture. Smile, he murmured against my temple. They're deciding whether you're a trophy or a liability. Which one is safer? I asked through my teeth. Neither. But trophy buys you the evening. A man approached, broad, silver-haired, the kind of face that had learned to look pleasant the way predators learn to move slowly. He kissed my hand. His eyes called me a dead woman. Councilman Reeves, Patrick said warmly, and the warmth was so precise, so weaponized, that I finally understood what he was doing. He wasn't showing them he'd forgiven me. He was showing them that touching me meant touching him. That I was untouchable, not because I mattered, but because he had decided I did, and no one in this room had yet survived deciding otherwise. He was using me as a shield. The horrible part, the part that coiled hot and shameful in my chest, was that it was working. It wasn't until Reeves turned to leave that I saw it, the near-invisible nod he exchanged with a younger man near the east corridor. A nod that meant something. A nod that had a timeline. I pressed my fingers into Patrick's arm. The man by the east door, I said quietly. He just received an order. Patrick didn't look. He raised his glass, unhurried, and beneath his breath said 3 words with a stillness that turned my blood to ice. I know. Don't run. He'd taken a blade meant for me. That was how it happened, not heroically, not announced. A scuffle near the east corridor, glass breaking somewhere behind us, and then Patrick's hand around my wrist, pulling me into a side room while blood darkened his sleeve. Now he sat on the edge of a mahogany desk while I pressed a folded cloth against the gash across his palm. His tattooed hand. The ink shifting under my fingers as I worked, dark, concentric, a pattern I'd stared at across a courtroom for 6 weeks without ever being close enough to read. Then I saw the scar beneath it. Old. Silvered. Running diagonal across the meat of his thumb in a shape I knew by heart, because I had spent 3 years believing it was the last thing my brother ever saw. My hand stopped. That scar, I said. My voice came out fractured. The night Marcus disappeared. He's alive. 2 words. The room ceased to exist around them. Patrick held my gaze, steady and unflinching, the way a man looks at you when he's been waiting years to say something and has rehearsed the damage it will do. The syndicate had already marked him. I had 48 hours before they moved. So I moved first, pulled him out, buried his name, built him a new life somewhere they'd never look. A pause, weighted and deliberate. I needed someone credible to testify. Someone with real grief. Someone they'd believe. The cloth slipped from my fingers. You let me think you killed him, I whispered. You let me hate you. You let me put you in prison. It had to be real, he said quietly. If you'd known, they'd have seen it on your face. And you'd both be dead. I stood there with his blood on my hands, literally, trembling, and felt the entire architecture of the last 5 years collapse inward. My testimony. My righteous fury. My survival story. All of it scaffolding built on a truth he had hidden inside a lie to keep me breathing. I didn't know whether to weep or strike him. Where is he? I demanded. Where is Marcus? Patrick's jaw tightened, the first fracture I'd ever seen in that wall of composure, and the dread in his eyes was worse than any answer. "That," he said slowly, "is what I've been trying to find out. Stay with me until the end, because this story will shock you to the core." Before we begin, don't forget to like this video. Hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Now, the first shot came through the library window at 11:47 p.m. I know because I was staring at the clock on the mantel, trying to decide whether betrayal or grief was the heavier thing to carry, when the glass exploded inward and Patrick had me on the floor before the sound finished echoing. Then the lights went out. Not a flicker. A decision. The whole estate swallowed by darkness so complete it had weight, and from somewhere below us came the percussion of doors being breached, men moving fast, the syndicate arriving not to negotiate but to erase. "Stay behind me," Patrick ordered. "How many?" I asked. "Enough." He was already moving, low and certain, and I understood that this man had spent his entire life in rooms where the lights went out and people came to kill him, and he was still here. Still standing. I found the gun on the floor beside a fallen guard. A SIG safety off. I knew how my handler in witness protection had insisted, back when I still believed the government was my guardian angel. My hands were shaking, and I let them shake because shaking hands can still pull a trigger. Patrick turned and saw me holding it. Something crossed his face, not surprise. Recognition. Like he'd always known this version of me existed and had simply been waiting for circumstances to introduce us. "You don't have to," he started. "Yes," I said. "I do." What followed was not graceful. It was door frames and darkness and the brutal arithmetic of survival. How many steps to cover, how much noise to make, when to move, and when to go absolutely still. Patrick never once told me to stay back. He fought beside me like I had always been there, like the space at his flank had always been shaped exactly like me. When it was over, when the last of them retreated and the estate exhaled into a ringing, blood-scented silence, I was standing in the wreckage of Patrick Vane's empire with a gun in my hand and adrenaline burning through every vein I owned. He crossed to me slowly, took the gun from my hands with the careful reverence of someone handling something newly dangerous. His eyes moved over my face the way they had in courtroom 4B, except this time there was no hunger in them. Just pride. Raw and unguarded and devastating. "I told you I'd never forget this face," he said quietly. His thumb traced my jaw, the first truly gentle thing he had ever done. "Now the whole world will remember it." I should have felt victorious. I had chosen a side tonight, survived it, and the man who had claimed me was looking at me like I had finally become what he always believed I was. Instead, ice moved through me. Because the whole world remembering my face was exactly what had destroyed my life once before. And in the corner of the room, half buried under debris, Patrick's phone was lit with an incoming call from a number I recognized. A number I had memorized 5 years ago. Marcus. Alive. Calling. And based on the 9 missed calls beneath his name, calling with something that couldn't wait.